Today, we will focus on how I find my trading bias and which strategy that I use to trade. We will also talk about the MasterClass program at the end, which many people wait for. Last week, we traded the pump. We took long trades one after another. Let's talk about finding your bias in this chart madness and how to use the best strategies to enter trades. First of all, at the beginning of the week, all of us noticed these giant equal highs at the top. And sooner or later, we knew that we were going to take that out. I want you to notice this area with liquidity sweep and the imbalance fill. Let's take a closer look in the area. First of all, this is the fuel grab area, our gas station. But for what? To take out that massive equal highs above. Now we have two cases here. Case 1. Is the area holding or not holding? If that was the case, I would wait and watch the further price action. But the area held its price very well. Case 2. Price holding the area and the rally starts. If you go and check out my Twitter, I was already long-minded towards the equal highs. Every trade I took this week was only longs. I have never looked at short setups. I took trades long after longs, around 4 or 5 trades that you can see on Twitter if you follow me. But I will focus on one specific trade this week because it will teach you a lot of things. Let's improve your bias even further and how to approach to the charts. After a while, that massive equal highs turned into a perfect equal highs, as you can see. I was like 99.9% for sure it was going to be hunted. I left 0.01% margin for being false. Let's zoom in the area and talk again about something special. I teach this in my MasterClass program. When is an MSB a true MSB or just a liquidity hunt? People always get confused about this. I think this is the perfect example for you. Notice this small swing failure pattern right here, and the inner structure shifts. Most beginner traders think this is an MSB, and we keep going short from this area. Because people are always missing the bigger picture. This is not an MSB. I teach this as a car, fuel, gas station example in my masterclass. Price needs a fuel to reach its destination. What happens here? The price is out of fuel before the final pump, going down to grab fuel right here. So, it is all about bigger picture. Let's jump to the 15 minutes to discuss further. Right here, right around the New York Open at 9:30 a.m., we have the most amazing structure, the power of 3. Let me explain. We have this giant equal highs above, right? We have the main bias. But we need the fuel to move there. Remember, everything in the universe requires energy. Imagine that you are walking towards a destination. What do you do when you are tired? You stop, rest, and eat. Basically, fuel up. Price is the same. It needs energy to move. Price cannot go to the destination at once. So the smart money creates this perfect triple equal lows to grab energy, basically hunting your stop loss. Then the power of this structure happens with manipulation. But this happens right around the 9:30 a.m. Why? Because it is the New York Open. If I do day trading, I am mostly focusing on New York Open areas. But why? The most important time of the day, when volatility hits all the markets. Millions of traders and investors taking new positions or closing their positions. And the big money is in the United States. Remember, volume is required to move the price. What is volume? Volume is people and the algorithmic bots. Let's look deeper and deeper within 5 minutes. The first shift of structure actually happens right here within 1 minute charts if you check it out. And this would be the perfect trade to catch, a perfect 5-hour trade, basically growing your account 5% in a single day. Since I had to take care of real estate businesses outside, I missed so many moves last week. But luckily, I did not miss the whole move. Remember, every single time frame has their own structure. From the 5-minute perspective, market structure happens between these two levels. And this was the true 5-minute MSB. Price was already extremely bullish. I directly jumped to trade right here. However, I can already hear your questions. What about the super BPR area? Yes, it was a perfect BPR and SR flip to enter a trade. It was already my second plan. If my trade failed, I already set the alarm to that level. I was going to enter again by covering this imbalance area. This was my backup plan. You need to understand this. If I have a perfect target and bias set, I never mind losses. I can always re-enter trades because my bias and target are already set. I am confident. I do not need a perfect entry. I only need one good entry which will cover every loss and make me profit. Finally, the MasterClass. Yes, after 1 year of very hard work on the nights, I managed to complete it with my extremely busy life. I'm really satisfied with the end result, covering everything that I wanted to cover. It was a really long journey, but it was worth it in my opinion. So, what is the MasterClass about, and do you really need it? Let's discuss. In the first stage of the MasterClass, we will master all the concepts of liquidity, inefficiencies, and structures. I will go very deep into every single subject and teach you how I really find my main targets and bias before trading. How I understand if a market structure break is a true break or liquidity grab. The first stage has many concepts you already know if you completed my free trading course. It will also be a great recap for you besides learning new things. In the second stage, we will work on entries and confirmations using momentum superbugs with forward and reverse trades. You'll learn how to write structures towards a main target and bias we found in the stage 1. Then we will talk about magic alignments. This is my secret sauce. How I confirm my entries and manage my risk before entering trades by combining multiple assets at once. What gives me confidence to take the trade or avoid the trade or just reduce my risks? Finally, we will talk about trade management. We will talk about 5 different yo-yo management strategies that I regularly use. Because there are millions of ways to trade than you know. You are not stuck or lost in a single system, remember. Finally, we will talk about a personality test. You will focus finding the best strategy and time frames for you. Maybe you are not a great micro scalper with 1 minute, but an amazing day trader who uses 15 minutes and above. You will discover the answer. Here is the main question. Do you need the MasterClass program? My answer is no. What kind of a person says do not buy it? Funny, isn't it? But think about it. If you completed my free trading course and had great results already, why would you want to learn extra? After all, trading is all about making money, not strategies. However, if you feel like you have completed the free trading course and you still have room to grow, move to the next level, then yes, I am very sure this program will help you a lot because you will discover things that you have never seen before, different logics and systems to trade. It will change your perspective on trading. Finally, if you are a person looking to flip $10 account to $100,000, I can 100% assure you this masterclass program is not for you. You can just go watch some of those to the moon courses or YouTube channels. As for pricing, it is just hard to put a price tag on this program. I know that horrible courses are being sold for $500 or $1,000 out there. But as I promised to the community, it will be cheap. I will keep the price at $59 until the new year. Then I have to rethink the pricing. After all, this is the result of 1 year of effort. I want to keep the program limited, so this is not a program that you can swipe your card and buy. Just mail me and ask for the join. You can find the website in my description or pinned comment below if you are interested in it. Mete Kaplan, masterclass.com. For the moment, take care, friends. See you next week with new trades.